Good morning, Pantsers. Since we're starting the story game, I thought I would tell you why I suggested it or what made me think of it in the first place. I mean, I've played the story game before in various versions, you know, like probably a lot of you have done. We used to play it in school a lot, like where you would have a piece of paper and you'd write like one sentence and you only got to read the sentence ahead of you to figure out what to write, and then you would end up with this really strange sort of Mad Lib sounding type story. But actually that's not what I was thinking of when I suggested it, and honestly I don't really know like why it popped into my head at that particular moment last week. Basically it was just what I said. I was bored and I was trying to think of something to do that would be different than like my usual vlog, what I'm doing right now. And I remembered the story of the book Sorcery and Cecilia, and that is what made me suggest the story game. You guys may or may not have heard of this book. It's called Sorcery and Cecilia, or The Enchanted Chocolate Pot, and it's by Patricia C. Reed and Caroline Stevermer. And I think I'm pronouncing Caroline Stevermer's last name correctly, but I don't really know. I don't think I've ever actually heard anyone say it out loud before, so you know, Caroline, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. And what happened, they were both already published authors, and they were at I don't know what it was. I don't remember if it was like a convention or some kind of writing retreat, or, you know, maybe they were just out having lunch somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, there were a bunch of writers, and the two of them went out to lunch with some other writers, and Caroline Stevermer started telling the group about how when she was a kid at camp, they would play the letter game, where you write a letter in character and then you give it to your friend, and your friend writes you a letter back in their own character, and that's how you do the story back and forth. You know, instead of doing the one sentence thing, you write a whole letter. Patricia C. Reed apparently became like really infatuated with this idea, and she badgered Caroline Stevermer into playing the game with her, so that when they went home, Patricia C. Reed, you know, wrote a letter and sent it off to Caroline Stevermer, and so they started sending these letters back and forth. At some point they realized that they had basically written a book, and eventually it was published. They eventually wrote 2 sequels. I tried to find my copy of Sorcery and Cecilia because there's an author's note at the end where they talk about it, and I was trying to remember the details of the story, but I can't find it naturally. I can find the other 2 though. These are they. The Grand Tour is the second one, and The Mislaid Magician, or 10 Years After, is the third one in the series. So I just thought that was a really great story, like, for the birth of a book. In fact, that's part of the reason that I ended up reading Sorcery and Cecilia in the first place, you know, I don't know, a few years ago, whenever it was, because I had heard that story beforehand. I don't know, I'd read it somewhere. I had read some of Patricia C. Reed's work before, but not Caroline Stevermer, and so I was really interested to see how it had turned out. And it is, in fact, all of the books are absolutely just charming. And Sorcery and Cecilia in particular is just delightful. And I mean, I recommend them if you guys like that kind of book. I read something about them somewhere where someone described them as sort of Jane Austen meets Harry Potter, which is like, it's kind of accurate. They're set in like the early 1800s. They're not very Harry Pottery, but there is magic. They're just really enjoyable and they're fun, and I recommend them if you like that sort of thing. So that's, you know, that's kind of what was in my head when I suggested the story game, because when they talk about the letter game, they always sound like they had a lot of fun writing the book, and it always just kind of stuck in my mind as this really sort of interesting thing to do. And I don't know, I just thought it would be like a fun group activity, I guess. Okay. Now it's time for this week's story game. I am a terrible reader aloud. You guys should probably know that. The first odd thing was tiny. So tiny that none of them would realize its oddness till much later. Alexandra found a coin in the woods near their cottage. She knew right away that it wasn't a coin of their own kingdom. It was too small, for one thing, and it was the wrong color for another. It was a dull brownish color, and it had a funny ridged edge. There had been markings on it once, but they were too worn to read. When she got home, she put it in the little box under her bed where she kept her treasures, and she forgot about it. The next thing that happened was much bigger.